So, yeah, that's right. Yes, Roland.
For the tutorials that we'll have.
Yes.
There is the tutorials that are set up.
Yes. Yes.
If you write down on the whiteboard somewhere.
I can give you this, the secret password. You should already have an account by this time though, Roland, right? But you don't. Okay. Always like to see things done in real time, don't you? There's your secret code. Withered Vampire 2. That's the code you need to make a login onto our server, our virtual server.
It's just the Einstein.
So the normal tutorial server is etk.lfc.ccc.edu. This one is etk1.ccc.lfc.edu. Much beefier machine. If you want to go there now, you can. We don't have a tutorial until the end of the day. So just briefly, that's if you go there, you go to that URL, and you can use that code to create a login for yourself. What's that, Roland? You lost my screen share. Or are you still just seeing this? Or did I just share the slides? Is that what happened? All right. Hold on. This meeting is being recorded. Okay. Stop share. Yeah, I thought I did share my whole screen, but hold on. Because this should be the whole screen up here, right? All right. So there's the code and there's the server for the tutorials. How many people plan to take the tutorials? All right, Roland, I'm sure you'll learn this eventually. Okay. All right. So I guess what I can do, since I've allocated a half hour for myself and took 10 minutes, I can start on my next thing, which is going to be me anyway. Introduction to the Einstein Toolkit. Any further questions before I do?
How much memory do you need to run that Einstein Toolkit?
It depends. So the amount of memory that you need depends on the number of grid functions you're going to use. Each grid function goes to distributed data structure. And the Einstein Toolkit will calculate how much memory it's using to display it to you. I can't vouch for how accurate that number is, but I think it's pretty close to the memory it uses. There was a time when we had our first supercomputer here, Supermicro first, when the memory used for our black hole simulations was just about enough to fill the node. So the thing would run intensively on all the memory, and then like half the time, we'd lose a node or two. Ryoji Takahashi was a student at the time. He was the bane of the sysadmins. He would come in there and crash nodes every day. But nowadays we have much beefier memory per node, and it's usually not a problem.
So it's less than a terabyte?
Yes. No, you're not gonna get that high. We used to run, as I say, the original black holes used to run in a gigabyte per core.
Okay.
So I mean, that can be a terabyte if you have enough cores, but usually it's not going to use a terabyte on a single node.
Okay. So since you can get a gaming machine with 4 gigabytes.
Yes, you should be able. So running on your gaming machine shouldn't be hard. Difficulty is up until this point in time, you couldn't really use the GPU, which is where most of your horsepower is. So with CarpetX, that's going to change. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Let me go to my slides. All right. Okay. So this is the introduction to the Einstein Toolkit, a talk that it's given every workshop. It's modified every workshop. I forgot. I went through and I updated everything.
I was gonna say, I remember that slide.
You need a Sharpie?
Yes, I'm gonna Sharpie. I'm just gonna write on the screen here. I remember to modify everything except the date. Well, before I put things into the collected notes here, I'll have to change that. Anyway. Many people have modified this over the years and changed it around. And this clicker doesn't work. Oh, it does. Okay. So the Einstein Toolkit is a collection of scientific components and tools to simulate and analyze general relativistic applications, astrophysical systems. It's freely available from einsteintoolkit.org. It's supported by these numbers, which should also be updated. So that's definitely the last thing you'll see that needs to be updated. Okay, so it's a state-of-the-art set of tools for numerical relativity, and it's all open source. Currently, there are 417 members from 290 sites and 49 countries. So if you want to become a member, there's a place on our website where you can say, hey, I'd like to be a member. And that declaration is all it takes. And then we put you on the list of members and send you emails if you opt in. And why wouldn't you? You won't get that many emails, but you know, okay. I didn't rebuild my slides. That's what's wrong here. I'm going to show you another live code demonstration. LaTeX is probably on a par with complexity compared to the Einstein Toolkit, right? So
That's one presentation.
yes. The problem is each image gives it a headache and formatting and so on. It's
You got the time.
so you got the gorilla fighting. Yeah, I got the extra time, right? So you can this is awfully entertaining all by itself, right? There's always warnings.
I think that should be a C extra.
So 56. Gotta be almost done. I've never seen anything done with LaTeX that didn't have an overfull HBox. I feel like that's a requirement for any LaTeX document. All right. And let's get back to that slide. Okay. See this? It's got a 2024 now. And these numbers are slightly bigger. Okay, so we have 481 publications, 58 theses. This is our rough count. As you can imagine, it's very difficult to get these numbers completely accurately. I feel like maybe with the theses, we could probably make an official list of them, although I don't know if anybody wants to do that. So we have regular tested releases of the Einstein Toolkit. So a lot of times you go and you use a piece of software from the internet, you don't know if it's going to work. And I can't promise you, I can't promise you that, you know, you won't encounter a bug with the Einstein Toolkit, but we have a very dedicated effort to making sure that doesn't happen. So every 6 months, modulo, we put out a new release. And if it weren't for this workshop and my vacation last week, we would have one more release now than we do. We have user support through various channels. There's the mailing list, users@einsteintoolkit.org. And we have meetings every Thursday morning, which any of you are welcome to attend and ask your questions and bring up your issues and so on. Down here, we have a list of we have pictures of our maintainers, current people who have put their heads on the chopping block to say that they will help make sure that this toolkit does what it's supposed to. You could have your picture there someday if you chose. Stop me at any time if you have a question. Okay, so here's just sort of a smattering of images and science that can be examined by the Einstein Toolkit. We have binary black hole mergers, of course, which is where everything started. We have neutron star mergers, supernovae, accretion disks, boson stars, area black holes, cosmic censorship, any sort of fully general relativistic calculation that you can think of that you want to do. That's kind of what the Einstein Toolkit was designed for. Now, it is a general purpose. It is a general purpose toolkit. It's designed to solve any Cauchy problem, really. So if you've got some kind of initial data, some kind of way of evolving that data in time, the Einstein Toolkit can be used for that. And it has been used to, on occasion, to do things like simulations of water waves. I made a Boost-Nesk equation solver for it once that ran in 2D. I still have it somewhere. So it can do all these other things, but most of the special purpose science modules that it has are all focused on general relativity. So the Boost-Nesk thing isn't in the standard distribution by any means. And all the things for finding apparent horizons and so forth are. We name each of our releases after a famous dead scientist. And we try to alternate between male and female scientists. This last one is the Louise Meitner release. It came out on the 14th of December of last year. Samuel Cupp, who is in the audience, was our release manager. Brief applause for Sam. I was his assistant manager, which meant, you know, I just said, "You're doing a good job, Sam." But I'm going to be release manager for this one, so anyway, you don't. That's the purpose of this secondary role, is you get to do it the next time if you're the assistant. Ideally, if you are joining our toolkits and you want to take on this role, the assistant position is to sort of prepare you for doing the release manager. So our new release has many new features. It is I really thought I'd modify this slide. So one of the things that it has that I left off, apparently, is Carpet X. Carpet X is our new driver thorn, which has been, we've been working on for many years. Is going to make it possible to use GPUs. We have the first release of the framework neutral Braille thorns that Sam will be telling you about. And we have the DNS data thorn, which was added to support SGRID, which, if you don't know, is a tool for generating binary neutron star initial data, amongst other things. Any questions? All right, and I mentioned our server there, which you have been given the login instructions for already. All right, so creating a numerical relativity code is a community effort, right? It's like apparently like a bunch of ants trying to eat a piece of apple. And why do we do it? So there are computational challenges. So here's our first computing device. We couldn't do black holes with that. We have had various other computing devices over the years. Hardware keeps changing, its capabilities keep changing. The things that are required to use it keep changing. This isn't the current, yeah. So, you know, we try to keep our codes running on the latest supercomputers, and here's an example of one. And what we want to be able to do, right, is we want to simulate cutting edge science. We want to use the latest numerical methods, and we want to make use of the latest hardware. When I was a graduate student, computers didn't have cache, right? That came later. And we have to worry about that now, to some extent. There's vectors that I did have to worry about. You know, when I used to use the Cray, and you could write your loop such that nothing depended on the things before and after. It would be vectorized, and then you were done with optimization. I vectorized it. Good. Things have gotten trickier since then. Now we have accelerators. We have to scale to many cores, parallel programming, scale to many nodes. Different algorithms come up. And algorithms typically are at least as important as the hardware advances. They're usually more important in terms of getting performance out of machines. So efficient use of all this hardware and the changing hardware is complex and tedious. And you know, when I was a graduate student, as I said, all I had to worry about was whether my code vectorized, and I was done. But nowadays, if you want to get the performance out of the machine, that's a full-time job, right? For multiple people. And you require experts from different disciplines. And you require good data layouts and APIs, and you need to ensure correctness, and you need to have good modularization of the things that you're doing. And the design and implementation needs to be carefully thought out in order to, you know, ensure that you maintain usability of your code. Modularization is probably the most important concept in computer science, in my opinion. The more you can modularize something, the more you can break it into individual pieces, the more successful you're going to be. And you know, it's an insidious thing. Like if you look at any code written by graduate students, say from my age, from my time, you will see, you know, somebody has coded their evolution equation. They got it copied 3 times because they're doing Runge-Kutta. And they've got, you know, if it's time to print out written in there. And all these things show up in the same loop. And that looks fine, right? If you're just a ordinary, you know, if you're a physicist who happens to program, you write something like that, and it looks fine, and you think you're okay, but you're not. What you've done is you've mixed up all the different concerns into one thing. You've got your parallelism, you've got your time integrator, you've got your physics, and you've got your output. It's all sort of mashed together. And then when you ever want to go to change anything, it becomes hard. What Cactus does, what it's designed, one of the things it does, and one of the main reasons it's been successful, is because it forces you to modularize things at almost every step. And yes, you could still probably do better, but it does a lot in terms of making you modularize things. It forces, it says, you know, you don't do your own I/O, you use an I/O thorn. And you might think I/O is a trivial thing. It's not anywhere near as important or as hard as my physics. But you know what? It's probably the major bottleneck for your code, right? Because most of your time is going to be spent in output. Because you know you can do calculations really fast on the CPUs, but if it takes you hours to write it out, you gain nothing. So all these different things matter a lot, and keeping them separate matters a lot. you don't want to spend your time thinking about how to do I/O or how to do checkpointing or all these other things. You want to be able to leverage them. And modularization makes that possible. All right. So, in case any of you are unfamiliar with the process of ghost zones, this is the essential concept that's needed for doing calculations across multiple computers, right? So the idea is you can have two processors, processor 0 and processor 1, and they have insufficient data available to them. Or they just need to make use of more CPUs. They need to divide the work up between physically distinct machines. And this wouldn't be a problem, except that you have stencils, right? So if you want to calculate the derivative of something, you use an approximation called a finite difference. And in order to do that, you need points from one or more neighboring zones. And once you do that, you have a problem at the edges. So if I'm going to calculate a piece on my part of the grid, I can't calculate it at the edge because I might need data from one more position. So what I do is I divide the grid into the interior and the outer parts. And I do my stencil calculation on the interior parts. And then after every step, I get the other information from the other processor. It's copied across, right? So each side has one ghost zone, which is a zone that lives on the other processor, and the data gets copied. So, right. So this data point gets copied here, and this data point gets copied to here. And both of these points are on both processors. So there's a little duplication there, but that's the price. That's the way you divide up the work. Any questions? Amruta.
So what I remember last
Its core is C++, but you can also do fortran programming. You may say that entirely for Peter.
and then later on the next stuff.
Well, no. So the idea with NERPy and NERPy plus is those are code generators. So if you want to think of that as front end. And that generates C++ code for the tool.
Right, and that's what I last year when I look at these equations, I think I've gotten a lot of them. But is there going to be a time when we need would it be possible to have that answer?
So I have this. So the recent one of the recent developments in the Linux kernel is a thing called landlock. And landlock is a way to give away your capabilities if you're a running process. You give away your ability to make connections, give away your ability to write files anywhere or read files anywhere. You can specify exactly what you're giving up. But what you can do with it is you can start an MPI program such as Cactus. And then you call MPI in it, and then you've made all the connections you need to make. And then you can call landlock and say, I don't need to make any more connections. I only need to read my initial data file directory. I only need to write my output directory, right? And then I can do my calculation. And in principle, I can open that up to the network so that anybody could just submit a job and they couldn't, exploit some kind of buffer overload attack in the Einstein Toolkit framework, which I'm sure there are many. So my theory is, right, that I can take the Einstein Toolkit and I can make it into a service. So you can have a curl command where you submit a tar file to run on SMIC. So we have a supercomputer SMIC, which is very underutilized. And I was thinking I could make this something that you can on demand. You have a job to run on SMIC from the internet. If I could get something like landlock in place. I don't know when that will happen, but that's a plan I have.
And so when you're talking about the science side, the things we have
Right.
So what about libraries? We have the graphics and structure and things that are coming up. Would there be or using actual data and internet?
It should be possible. We have one of our gallery examples was the 2015 sighting of first sighting of gravitational waves, which you can download and simulate yourself. If you've got, say, 100 nodes or 100 cores or stuff. You could make other ones. I don't think that Cactus is normally the one used by Longo. I think they use Spectre. I'm not sure. When they want to simulate a waveform. But they could, right? You could use it.
Thank you.
They only use spec.
Yeah, okay. But in any event, you could use the Einstein toolkit for that. And if it becomes an easy enough, if I can make it an on-demand service at some point, maybe someone will say, oh yeah, spec will have. The Einstein toolkit I can run on curl.
Yes.
So we'll see how that goes.
Can I ask about this thing?
Yes.
So with the process of zero process ones, you have your like space time and you split it out into processes.
Right.
What happens at the actual boundary of the space?
Right, so then you have a physical boundary, and then you have to have, so while these interior boundaries are synchronized between things, your exterior boundaries, you have to specify some condition. And there are standard, and it's just like in math, right, if you want to solve an equation, you have to specify your boundary conditions. So they can be constant, they can be extrapolated. There's like the Robin condition, right, where you have an outgoing wave board that is actually new with this release, which also should have been on that previous slide I showed you, new rad X, which is trying for carpet X to fill in the data on the outer boundaries. The way that works is it assumes that you have a wave outgoing with, what is it? Oh, yes, there's my email. It assumes you have an outgoing wave with some kind of 1 over R to the n component to it. And it extrapolates the data to try to have no reflections. So you have to supply a boundary condition for the outer boundaries. And ideally, you do your synchronization in your physical boundaries at the same time. So you do your calculation of the interior, you update all your exteriors, you go to the next step. Okay. Any other questions? I can't see any raised hands. If somebody sees a chat, please just shout at me, because I might not notice. All right. Okay, so if you want to look at this, that ghost zone picture another way, it's kind of like this. Start out with a computational domain, and if I was just working 2 dimensions like this, I could chop it into 4, and then I could look at it this way also, right, where I have my ghost zones here, right? At least the amount of memory used for all 4 of these is a bit more than this. And if I use higher order methods, higher order derivatives, and I cut these cells down to very small, then I can wind up with a situation where I'm using much more memory, much more memory here than I use here. So there's a balancing act. Every time you do anything in computer science or computational science, you're making trade-offs and doing a balancing act. And what we really try to do in these simulations is use a more complex grid than what I've just shown you, right? What we really need to, we want to have a spherically shaped outer grid because that's better for extracting waves and modeling them accurately. Well, in the interior, the geometry is harder to adapt to. So we wind up with these refined grids near the black holes or neutron stars or whatever we happen to be colliding. And those live inside a rectangular mesh, and that rectangular mesh lives inside these 6 different, well, logically rectangular meshes, which model the spherical outer part of the black hole. So this is a sort of representation of how many simulations have been done. It's not the only way to do it, but it is a good way to do it. And the point is, if you're a Cactus programmer, right, what you're thinking about as you know, when you're writing your physics code is how to update something on a logical box. So this blue thing is a logical box. This green thing is a logical box. This highly refined thing in here is a logical box, right? You just write your code with, you know, how do I update my my right-hand side, and Cactus can do all these other pieces for you. So it becomes very powerful. Okay, so this is the slide we saw before, right? We have our simulation of cutting-edge science. We want to use the latest numerical methods. We want vectorization. Vectorization turns out to be a highly non-trivial thing for the Einstein equations. As you know, they can have hundreds of terms. They can overflow the instruction cache even if you're not careful. And so, and most compilers simply won't vectorize them, even if the vectorization looks obvious to a human. The compiler looks at the length of the equation and says, I give up. So sometimes we need help. So we have Crank and NURPy, which are code generators, one in Mathematica, one in Python, and they can put in explicit vectorization for you when the compiler won't. You can scale to many cores. You can use OpenMP. Of course, that's the normal technology for that. In Carpet, the old style way, you have to do that kind of manually most of the time. With Carpet X, it's going to tile your code for you, and you won't ever apply an OpenMP directive yourself. Scaling to many nodes, you need to use MPI, and you need something like Carpet and Carpet X, which are components of the Einstein Toolkit, to help you manage that. Because you probably don't want to become an MPI programmer in addition to a scientist, physical scientist. And then you have adaptive mesh refinement, which gives you the refined grids. And again, you probably don't want to write that on your own. I mean, some of you might. You know, there's always the desire that gets stuck in somebody to write their own version of things. But if you can reuse something, it's a good idea. So we also have AMR's adaptive mesh refinement. I don't know why I put method of lines in here, but I did. And method of lines is going to be a generic time integrator that Cactus will provide for you. So that means that if you want to use RK4 or RK3 or some kind of other strange time derivative, you can Adams Bash for it. You can use iterative Frank Nicholson, whatever you want to use. In principle, it's a parameter file change. Right? It doesn't directly impact your code. How am I doing on time? When did I say I was going to be done? Okay. I've got 48 more minutes, so I've got tons of time. Great.
Stutter.
I could stutter. Jokes. Yes, jokes. Did you hear the one about? Okay. GPUs. So GPUs are the biggest problem in recent programming. I don't think it's possible to overstate how much of a problem they have been for scientific codes. And you know, getting performance out of them has always been hard. But anyway, Carpet X is hopefully the way forward on getting the performance out of the GPU. So you, as the programmer of a scientific code, still have to only specify how to do something on the logical box. This time you need to supply a lambda function. But with that lambda function, Carpet X should be able to do the rest. And there's my email again. Hopefully nothing embarrassing comes up.
You use the NVIDIA library stuff or not?
Yes, no, this will use NVIDIA, right? So what's going to happen is CUDA is a C++ dialect, right? And you're going to wind up compiling your code with CUDA. You're just going to be writing C++ code. But you're going to, as I say, you're going to write this lambda function. You're going to pass it to this. You'll see how it works later. Jay Collini is going to give you a tutorial on how to use Carpet X. And anyway, you'll just pass this lambda function, and then you'll get whatever system that you use. Use CUDA on NVIDIA. What's the thing for? I forget what you use for AMD. What? One more time. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Right. You can use CUDA or HIP or whatever Intel comes up with. You know, that will all be managed underneath for you. So.
So Carpet X is universal, I know all.
Yes, because it's based on, my mind's suddenly blank out. AMRX. Yes, thank you. It's based on Amrex, and Amrex handles all of those things and stuff. It's designed to be together.
One of the issues that it's called other library, it's not working together, but.
What do you mean another library?
Well, I mean, you call, then you call, we need to do stuff, or you call, and you're calling.
So the way it works is, CUDA and HIP and all these other things all kind of work the same way. They all want to have a lambda function which they apply to some loop over a big data structure. All simply, so that part is all the same. The only thing they have to do is use a combination of, compiler directives and libraries to get the right framework for calling whatever the local hardware is.
Okay, that's the code.
And that comes from Amrex, right? We leverage that capability from Amrex. And so CarpetX leverages that capability from Amrex to do a generic base to the hardware. And we decided to base CarpetX on Amrex because, the DOE poured a lot of money into that, more money than they're going to give us. So we thought, maybe we could get some benefit from that. Machine learning. I think there have been a few efforts at using AI inside of a general relativistic framework, but it's certainly not mainstream at the moment. I think this is going to be a revolution of sorts when it happens. I think there are lots of different kinds of things that we could do with machine learning in a relativistic simulation. None of it is easy, right? But I think there are plenty of places where we could benefit. And again, this is something that you don't want to have everybody working on, right? You don't want to have everybody working on all these different pieces every time they do anything, because you couldn't make progress. You want to be able to let the people who have a special interest and knowledge in one thing provide it and give the benefit to everyone else, right? And then FPGAs, I don't know if we'll ever use those things, but maybe there's some real value in it. And maybe there's some other different hardware, ASICs. Can you imagine a special purpose silicon for cats? I don't know. I don't think that's likely to happen, but we're getting to a point in hardware development where that sort of thing might be possible, right? Neuromorphic processors. I just put that there because it's another thing, right? And then finally, qubits. We're going to actually have a talk about quantum computing towards the end, so stay tuned. It is possible to do things like black hole simulations with qubits. I don't think anybody has tried it. I think the quantum computing machines aren't quite up to the task yet, but in principle they can. And it's always been a nightmare of mine that somebody is one day going to hand us a board that says, it's got a vector processor, it's got a bunch of cores, it's got a bunch of AI cores, it's got some FPGA processors, it's got, a neuromorphic processor, and it's got some qubits. Get all the performance out of this. And hopefully it won't ever be quite that bad. But the point is the hardware is getting more complex. There are more new paradigms, and every developer of a scientific code doesn't want to get their hands dirty with all of that. There's more and more mundane challenges to writing a code. There's efficient I/O, as I alluded to before. Seymour Cray had this famous comment where he said, a supercomputer is a device that takes a compute bound problem and turns it into an I/O bound problem. And it's very true. HDF5. So you want to have, so HDF5 is a portable binary format. There are other ones. This one has been the reigning champion for many years. It's the fundamental one used by Carpet and the older stuff. CarpetX wants to use newer things. HDF5 is a nice framework because the data is portable. You can do things like checkpoint your simulation on one machine and restart it on another machine with a different architecture and a different number of cores. As I said just now, you have checkpoint and restart capability, which any serious scientific code needs, right? If you want to run on a supercomputer, you need checkpoint restart. It's not some, it's very often an afterthought for people who are not computer scientists, but you can't just run a simulation for a week or a month without this. Because if you need a month to calculate something and you lose one node after 28 days, guess what? You've got a month of wasted computation. And that's a likely occurrence. So you need checkpoint restart, and it's nice to have it baked in. Parameter parsing. Parameter parsing is the least intellectually challenging operation that you might want to do, but it's still something that requires some effort, and you want it to be somewhat standardized. Probably if we were building it today, we would have based it on YAML, but we didn't build it today. We built it in 1997. So things were different then. But the other thing is the parameters are all modularized, right? So you don't have any of your parameter code intermixing with any of your other code. Think about it. Visualization. We have, I would say this is probably our weakest point, but we do have a number of tools for visualization of Einstein Toolkit data. And if you can't visualize your data, you probably can't do much with it. You also have various other capabilities for analyzing. Steering. This is something that I don't think anybody has used in decades, but it is in principle there. Unless Roland has a counterexample. He's trying.
I'm trying.
Yeah, so I mean, there was a time, right, when we were much less sure how to proceed with these calculations, make them stable, people babysit them and change parameters. Yes.
Yes, I have a context. Our binary infrastructure algorithm.
It does. I run that example and I didn't steer anything.
No, you didn't.
It's-
So I take it back. Changing grid scalars. Change the grid with grid scalars. That's one of the panels.
Yeah, so in principle, you can change what it's doing as it's running with steering. We even have some thorns that, will open a web server so that you can, connect to the running simulation and tell it to do some different things. But as I say, I don't think any of that has been used in decades. We could dust it off and make it work again if somebody wants it. Okay, so collaborative challenges. So we've talked a lot about the computational challenges to doing numeric relativity, but in reality, the collaborative challenges are the biggest problem, right? I mean, it's the fundamental thing that makes human beings successful is not so much our intelligence, which it's a necessary but not sufficient thing. We have to be able to communicate. We have to be able to get along with each other, or otherwise, whatever great ideas are in your head never get out, right? So you have collaborative challenges. You need people to work together. And everybody wants to be the big shot. Everybody wants to be the hero. Everybody wants to have their name in lights and a higher H index or whatever. But if we focus on ourselves only, we're not going to get anything done. And one of the great things about Calculus and the Einstein Toolkit is we decided that we needed a way to step back and say, hey, here's something for free that everybody can use, right? And so we have a bunch of different groups that are working on the same problem, but they don't have to all reinvent the same infrastructure. And so when they go to do their computations, they can do some things in common, and they can make, each one can make use of different machines, and they can tell each other how to make use of different machines. And we build a community, this community, the one that you're looking at here, which has lasted for 30 years. And these are some of the tools that we use to keep the community together. We have an email list, we have regular calls, and various channels of support. We have Git. When we started, we have Subversion and Mercurial up there because in principle, those things still exist, and in principle, we could still use them. But at the time the Einstein Toolkit was created, nobody had heard of it yet or was using it, so we had to make use of various other things. And we have a wiki. This is terrible because currently our wiki is down and in need of maintenance. I won't be able to get to it for at least a week. We have workshops like this one. And so those are the things those are some of the tools we use to communicate and sort of the blood flow of our community. And then we have our problems, we have competition. So the question is, how do you have a collaborative framework where you're also competing with each other? And the idea of the Einstein Toolkit is we have just a framework, which is a basic shell of something that says how we do things. And then each person can contribute something. So you have somebody who writes a new time integrator, for example. They can keep their code private. They can do some simulations with it. And after they've gotten whatever physics results they want or whatever computational science results they want, then they can open source their tool and other people can use it. So that's the way we deal with competition, right? Is you have two phases where you do things. First, you do your thing in private to get your credit, and then you give it back. And if you want to beef up your H index or your recognition, I think the best way to do that is to write a tool that everybody uses that everybody cites, right? So you find some way to do something and then give it away. It's probably the best way to do it. Standards. And I heard this quote, standards are like toothbrushes. Everybody has one, nobody wants to use anyone else's. And there's some truth to that. But to the extent that we try not to use our own toothbrush, we can make more progress in science, right? So, and by using a common framework, we collaborate on a certain set of standard ways of doing things. And we have cactus units, which are not the imperial metric, but it's an example. We have an HDF5 as a standard for storing data. Tools. So we have C++, C, Perl, and Fortran. Most of the glue and infrastructure parts of Cactus are written in Perl, and that's because it was written in 1997. Of course, if we were writing it today, we would have used Python. Python is a bit prettier, but this is our history. We work on various platforms. Ideally, you should stick to Linux as much as possible, but you can run on Mac. Windows, you can run on through WSL. I wouldn't try it a different way. I once did get it to work on Windows natively, but somebody reconfigured that machine and I never got it to work again. So use WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux. Credit, so we have a system for distributing credit. As I said, we have a DOI for Cactus itself. The various submodules of Cactus still want to cite various papers. And we have a list along with each module. You can look at the thing that you should cite for that module to give credit to the person who does it. One of the key things about Cactus, though, is it says we would like you to cite us, but you don't have to. It's not part of the usage agreement. You, just as a polite citizen, it would be nice if you did. Okay, and so we have a way for groups to get credit and give credits in exchange. And here are some of the places where you can find collaborators on this project, some of the countries, some of the states. I don't think this is a complete list by any means, but it gives you an idea of just how widely used the Einstein Toolkit is. So our goals are community driven. We're a core computational tool for general numerical physicists, but for general purpose too. You can use Cactus and the Einstein Toolkit for things that are not numerical. It is possible. So the fundamental components are Cactus, the flesh, which does almost nothing except act as food. That's sort of a standard way for these things to interact. We have the simulation factory, which is a Python a series of Python modules which are designed to make it easier to compile and manage simulations done with the Einstein Toolkit. One of the things that the sim factory does is it encodes information about each machine. So in principle, if we have configured the Einstein Toolkit on, say, Frontier or something, the next person who wants to use the Einstein Toolkit there gets the correct configuration, without having to go through the period of a month figuring out how to get all the compiler flags and everything right. Crank, which does code generation, as you know, you can easily get hundreds of terms in the Einstein equations, and you don't want to take the chance of getting them wrong. Jarnis Drustrup, the creator of C++, has this great quote. It says, "Being careful does not scale." And the idea is, if you can give a task to the machine to do, you should. You know, you shouldn't have to figure out all your correctness yourself. And Crank and NeRPy are both based on that. And then we have numerous other science models, event horizon finders, wave extractors, time integrators, and so on. Our guiding principles, we're open, community driven. We have good interfaces. I mean, you can argue how good anything is, anything can be better. There are certainly ugly bits of Cactus and the Einstein Toolkit, but I challenge you to show me any code that's 30 years old that has nothing ugly in it. It does a good job of separating physics from computational infrastructure. As I've tried to tell you, I think that's one of the key things that you want to do with any code is separate concerns. And you want to separate physics from I/O, from numerical integration, from parallelization. All those things should be distinct and separate. And it's production-ready code. It's high-quality code because we've got so many people working so hard on ensuring that it continues to run and that bugs continue to get fixed. So Cactus started out in 1997, the brainchild of a scientist called Paul Walker, who left us because, you know, ironically enough, we talk about all this credit stuff. He had trouble getting credit for work he did, which is a big, long story. But anyway, we have these initial pieces, the flesh and so on, which are kind of like designed to be puzzle pieces because they're designed to fit together with other things. And over time, you have a growing set of pieces that you can plug in interchangeably. In a way, a puzzle is a bad analogy because you can only put it together one way. But we want to have fairly identical pieces which we can interchange. But they have different purposes, and you can think of the colors as coding different things like physics or parallelization or something else. And we have a set of base modules that we use. So here's the thing that we want to solve: G equals E, right? And we want to have a certain standard way of doing things. Now, so you have space-time curvature that you need to care about. You have constants, by the way. Cactus tries to work in units where G equals C equals the solar mass. So those are called Cactus units. And generally speaking, if you don't want things to go wrong, you should probably think in those coordinates when doing your simulations with that. So this should really just be 8 pi. We have matter that you care about, the TMU, right? And then with all those things, you've got other concerns, you know, within matter. You've got hydrodynamics, electromagnetism, scalar fields, particle radiation. And so what we have is, we have a new registration. There's a module called ADM base, which has the standard ADM variables for 3+1 evolution. And we have them there not because we use the old ADM evolution methods, but because they provide an interface, right? You can always say, hey, this is how I construct space-time in those variables, and I can convert to and from as needed. And similarly, we have TMU new base, where you can get to the components of stress energy tensor. And you have MLVSSN, which is McLaughlin VSSN, and that is a space-time evolution, which is going to make use of ADM base and TMU base. And then we have GR Hydro, GR hydro is going to make use of hydro base and TU base and ADM base, right? And we have initial data thorns, which are going to make use of those things. So the idea is, you can switch out various hydro and spaceline modules and initial data modules, but they all can communicate with these same ADM, TU, and hydro base, and in principle can be developed independently, right? You can switch out your space-time evolution method and your GR hydro modules, right? And they should all work together. And there's some more, right? There's Illinois GRMHD, there's PROCA, there's Lean, Bicol, various other pieces that fit into this same interface. So again, guiding principles is somewhat of a repetition. We have open, community-driven software. We separate physics from computational infrastructures. We have stable interfaces allowing extensions. We simplify usage where possible. We want to be able to do science. We want for students to learn about how to do things and what, how these different components work. And we can't give you all of the things. My battery is running low. All right. Use Cactus to solve the battery problem. Give me just a moment. Having little pouches for things with cables on them is very helpful.
Glad it wasn't your pacemaker.
Yes, I'm glad it's not my pacemaker. I'm glad I don't have a pacemaker. I hope to never have one. All right. And I think there's an outlet back here somewhere. Yes. All right. I remember as a graduate student, being in a crowded auditorium watching one of my advisors, Larry Smart, give a presentation. And, here is this great scientist talking about all this complex stuff. And I watched him sit there fighting with his PowerPoint, with his overhead projector for like 10 minutes before he was talking. Something's very wrong with the way we're doing things. All right. So I think we're getting better on this, but maybe not. Okay, so the Einstein Toolkit can't give you all of those things, but it can give you a start at least at most of them. So as I said, it's open and free source. There's no requirement to cite anything. However, we request that you do. There's the DOI that you can cite. Maybe the ET or Cactus papers, those things were the way we did things before we had the DOI. And we have some papers for the components as well. And the list is all published on the website. And we had this comment, soon auto-generate list of citations during simulation run. And that still isn't there, and that was on the last version of these slides. So I'm talking to Roland and I said, why don't we get this pushed through and committed after this talk? Leaving it here should help motivate us to do it. So we don't have to say soon again for this. And in that spirit, we have cutting edge and future things. We have the new driver thorn Carpet X, which was in the last release finally. We have the new Hydrothorn Aster X, which should be soon. It's not going to be in the June release, but it will be maybe after that. In this coming release, we're going to have new Rad X, which will provide the outer boundary conditions, radiated boundary conditions for the Carpet X framework. Python code generator, whole output from NERPy. So there are various. So Zach has a number of modules that do this, and I have efforts in there as well. I wanted to rewrite it to use NERPy 2. Unfortunately, I didn't succeed in doing that before this workshop. So I have this here to motivate myself to make sure it's running again before the Amsterdam workshop. This is for Peter. We're promising current support in Salesforce 1B code. I think that's not there yet. But we did have it on the last slide, so I thought I'd keep it as a reminder of where we want to go. So Carbon X was added, the Grail, HDX, the Grail, thorns were added to this, this release that isn't quite out yet, as well as, and then no, I'm sorry, Grail is in the last release, right?
Grail and the Grail HD, which is the pure Hydra, that are already in.
Right.
And then there's updates and stuff.
Right. So it's new and old. And then, as I said, we have DNS data for importing escrow initiative. And I think there should, in addition to a Cactus server through Perl, I think it would be nice to have something like escrow available. Okay, so that's basically it. This is our website. We have tools for high performance computing and numerical relativity. We're open source. We have a worldwide community, and we're used in high-end research. There have been awards and things given to Cactus throughout the years. We're going to be in the next spec benchmark. I'm almost 100% sure. We've had 2 previous spec benchmarks. And we are supported by these Brandt numbers, not the ones you saw on that first slide. Although the old ones and the new ones are there. All right. And that is the end. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
The way I think this recently, what did you type in a sentence to describe the program and it's auto generated?
Right.
Then 2 is the full database stuff, gone through, found a bunch of errors and made recommendations on it.
Right.
Are those efforts happening all or not?
So, as far as I know, there's very little being done with AI in general relativity. I have my experience with AI code generation is you cannot trust it. I mean, it is often a good first cut at things, but you simply cannot trust it. And then you have to decide, you know, do I want to let the AI generate a code and then spend my time debugging what it came up with, or is it easier to just write something? And I think that a better use of AI is the other thing you said, is to say, here's a piece of code I wrote. Do you see any problems with it or anything I can improve? And then the AI can often make useful suggestions. This is just sort of using it in a generic way, not in a numerical relativity specific way. AI is generally good for any sort of problem where I don't care how I got the answer, but I can check that the answer is right. And there's a lot of places where we can do that, right? A lot of places where we don't care how we got the answer. So a gauge condition, perhaps, could be one example of something where we don't care. Any gauge condition is right? We don't have to know that there's not one way of doing it. So we could let it come up with a gauge condition, so long as it's smooth and so on, which is fine. That might be a place to use it. New radx could potentially use it to figure out the 1 over R behavior near the boundary. I think there are papers using AI for doing on the prim. Yeah, so there's some for doing on the prim, which is part of the hydro formulation, which is also a place where it could be useful. I think it could be useful in the initial data because AI is good at analytics. So I think there's lots of places where it could go. Most of them it hasn't gone there. Other questions?
What about the Amazon Web Services?
We could run through there, I suppose. I don't know that anybody's built car files for that. I mean, factory files for that. I mean, there's no inherent problem with running there. It's just that, as far as I know, all scientists have access to free stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty quick. Like, they don't support stuff like physics, so I just did that.
Right, but there's, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I guess I can't hear your question. So the question is, compute resources, can you use it through Amazon? And as I said, I don't think anybody has made the sim factory files for Amazon, which I think they could. I said that most universities have free clusters to use, but Amruta says, you know, they don't always. So my response to that is, you know, make sure you ask, because a lot of times people, you know, I find people are unaware of LSU's computing resources and become substantial. And you know, I have to steer them there. The other thing is there's this thing called access. I think it's called access. Yeah, you can apply for time through access to get time on big machines that way. I think even if you're a student, you should be able to get some substantial amount of time there. And so I would definitely exhaust that avenue before I went to Amazon. But even if you want to go through Amazon, your university may have paid for some amount of Amazon time. It might be able to apply. Anyway, I think you probably have more access to things than you realize. Yes, Keith.
So what's the minimum workstation? If it's, research on?
What is the minimum workstation for doing good research on? Roland has the answer to that. No?
No.
Oh, okay. So Keith asked, what is the minimum workstation that you have for doing research with Cactus? I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, well, it depends on what you want to do, of course.
You can get a terabyte on workstation. What kind of GPU would you get?
Well, as I said, the GPU is currently hard to use because you need Carpet X. And a lot of the helper thorns for Carpet X aren't yet publicly available. So like Space 10X and Master X and all these other things. You don't have all the facilities there. But if you had, say, 64 cores or 128 cores and a terabyte of RAM, I would think you could easily run all the gallery examples.
Well, Andy has this core machine, right?
Yeah,
That would be adequate.
it probably would be. Yes, I would bet you could run a binary. I bet you could run the binary black hole gallery example on it. But we haven't spec'd out a Cactus workstation. I mean, I suppose we could, but we don't have such a thing. I have a question. What's my question?
The chat.
What's the question in the chat? Somebody just tell me. That's my email. That's not the question in the chat. Nobody wants to tell me? Oh, okay.
And it popped up when you have-
I don't have my glasses.
Might have been a private message, so direct me.
Okay, it was a private message. Oh. Yeah, if anybody has a question, you can just put them in the chat and somebody will yell at me and tell me what they're.
So there's an underutilized machine on campus here
There's a ton of machines on campus.
that are underutilized.
Yeah, one in particular, Smith, is underutilized. It's one of these, you know, remember when Intel had these 5 processors that they were making a big deal out of, and then they discontinued them a year later?
They all ended up here.
Well, we have a 5 machine, and that's called Smith.
Okay.
And mostly people just use it for the CPUs, but it is underutilized, and it's old, but it's, you know, it's there.
Yes.
Hey there, I have a question. Arda? Can somebody give me the rest of that question? I have a question. No, we don't have any prerequisites required for this workshop. We have tried, that's one of the things we've tried to do with the tutorial server, is make sure you don't have to do homework before you come here, because chances are half the students wouldn't have done it, and would have been sitting there trying to do it, you know, in real time. When we first did these things, we tried to have people install Cactus on their own laptops. That was a disaster. We tried using VirtualBox and having, you know, people load up a virtual machine on their laptops and run there. It was less of a disaster. But, you know, I don't have a USB drive. I've only got, you know, 64 kilobytes of memory. What? How is it? So what we try to do, right, is we use Jupyter Hub server, so that all you need to have is a running web browser on your laptop. And with that, with the bar set there, we tend to be successful. Any other questions? All right, I think I'm done. Where are we time-wise? I've got 10 extra minutes, so I've used up a lot of time, is what you're telling me. That's what I'm hearing you say. The break is at 11 and it's 10:24. All right, so what we're going to have is we're going to have an exercise break. And when we're done, we'll come back and we'll get our waveform started. Hopefully Deborah Ferguson is online already. Oh, you're here. I'm sorry. I thought you weren't going to be here.
I made it.
Oh, all right. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you. I'm sorry. All right, so you're up next. Right.
What time?
Your talk is at 11.
Okay.
I'm sorry, the break is 10:30 to 11, and you're 11 to 11:30. So,
Extra break time.
yeah, extra break time. It's okay.